We moved to Arizona around, I want to say 2012. I could be wrong. My dates could be a little off there and everything. It's when our oldest son was first born. And soon after he was first born, we found out that we were pregnant again. And it wasn't your typical response that a lot of people have. At first it was like, oh, great. But then it became, oh, great. Like, what are we going to do? We just moved here. We were still trying to find a place. We just have a newborn. How are we going to come across this? And, at that moment in my life, abortion wasn't something, it's something you hear. It's something you know of. But much like other things that are legal, you think it's legal, so it should be right. And it must be something you can do. I didn't have any morality or any, thought about this, this is right. We can do this, but is it really a right thing to do? And, we found, and Kerstin was very, on board with that. I think that comes from a lot of how she was raised. Her family, was very much like that's something that could be in your back pocket. That's a good thing that you can have as an emergency situation if you just can't do it. And so when she was comfortable with that at first, I think I became more comfortable with it. But as I look back, I rested more on her comfort with it, and I became more numb to it because I really didn't have a voice in it. I really didn't know what we can do because it wasn't the joys of a new baby. It was like, how are we going to fix this? And she found a place locally when we were in Tennessee, when we moved from Arizona to Tennessee. And I remember her mentioning that there wasn't going to be anybody there, so you should feel comfortable being in the car, just parking. But I think that was the most interesting thing, going there, dropping her off. And, I had our newborn, couple-month-old baby still in the car. I think he was about 6 months at the time. And so it's, still trying to be dad, but also trying to fix a situation at the same time. I look back at that and it really, really changed things. It was really like, how could I sit there and say I was a father when I wasn't being a father to one, but I was being a father to another one? I drove away, had to take care of our son somewhere. We had to go run an errand. And I remember as we were coming back, I got a phone call. And I remember, it's still these words to this day just stick in my mind. They mentioned that, she's farther along than we estimated. And if you want to continue going through with this process, it's going to cost more money. And I've never thought I'd have to have that conversation ever in a phone call. But I didn't know what to do. Usually those moments, it's really easy just to figure out how to proceed with that next question, next answer. But I froze. I was hesitant. I didn't know what she wanted because I couldn't be there. And unfortunately, with that industry, that's how they do that. They separate you. They isolate you. And they make you very vulnerable in those situations because they make it seem like your only option is to fix this. And that's exactly how it felt. Like, hey, she's in there. We need to just get this done because this is what she wants. And I wasn't even able to consult with her about that. Like, hey, is this really what we want to do? But at that moment, I didn't have that ability to make that judgment. So I just said, just do it. And that was the end of the conversation. Okay, we'll get her out soon. And it was like, okay, like a machine, just pumping her in, pumping her out. And the whole drive back, I sat there and just dwelled on that, like, just do it. And then I got back and she was out. Wasn't the same person that went in. Just no emotion. It was like the emotion in the life was just sucked right out of her. Unfortunately, and you could tell something was missing. Absolutely. Between both of us, something was missing, but I just didn't know how to proceed with that. We had to go back on with our lives. And I think that kind of planted that seed of that, idea of what it means to be a father, what it means to be that, like, head of that household. We were in Tennessee, and the opportunity to move to Ohio came. And, I thought this would be a great idea. This will allow us to kind of just sweep everything under the rug. Let's just move to a new place, get away from all this. So out of sight, out of mind. and at that moment too, it was, we weren't talking about it. There was frustrations. You knew there was tension and it was deep rooted somewhere, but we weren't talking about anything. So I figured, out of sight, out of mind, if we can just get away from this, everything will be good. But it didn't. It just followed us right where we were, right where we moved to. I mean, yeah, the new idea of a new place, the exploring, all that kind of stuff took away a bit of it because, we get to go to new places, try new food, meet new people. And, for about 6 months, it was good. It was nice. There was laughter. We were able to explore. It just felt good. But as that, shine wears away, it started to come back. That the thoughts came back and it was hard. I just really didn't feel like I was a father at that moment. Again, how can I sit here and try to be a father of one child? And when we moved, we had another child. So we had our second son at that time. And it was just really hard. It was really hard to be a father at that point. And then 2 boys when I wasn't a father or even tried to be a father to one, didn't even really have a chance to. And I think that caused, God was not in my life at that moment. Not even at all. It was more so, we were just doing what we needed to do just to get by, just to figure out a way to fix it, just to make it better for them. And it was just a facade for us. And it was really hard. With that feeling of not being able to talk about it, it really came down to I didn't know what I didn't know. And I wasn't in there. I wasn't in the room when my wife had the abortion. And it was really a hard subject to talk about. And there'd be moments where we feel like we're about ready to talk about it, but we just couldn't. And I was still in that moment of, well, I'm glad we got this fixed. Our lives can get back to a normal, but there was nothing normal about our lives at that moment. Literally something was missing. And for me, at that time in my life, I've learned to get better about it. I was a fixer. Like when things were not working right, I tried to fix them. When someone was upset, I would try to help and try to fix it. And I was just doing everything we could to just fix it and just to keep getting by every single day. And over time, we couldn't even talk because it just would go into arguments. It would go into frustrations because there was so much that she experienced and she felt. And I wasn't there. She had to do that all alone. She was isolated. And I almost feel like it was because we agreed to this. It's what needed to happen that, okay, he probably doesn't even want to talk about this. He was probably on board with this. But then there's points of like the phone call that I was part of, that she wasn't part of that conversation. So I felt like neither of us would understand where we're coming at from each side. We know it happened. We know that there's just something's not right here. But I feel like the moment, if we don't talk about it, it eventually will just go away. But like anything, it does not go away. And I almost feel like it was soul ripping at that point. Medicine couldn't fix anything. Working late couldn't fix anything. Being away from my family couldn't fix anything. There was nothing that could fix it at that point. But there was a really interesting moment because one day it was just frustrating. It was just one of those frustrating days. And we decided, hey, let's just get in the car. Let's just go park. Let's just take a walk. And we found this church. And my wife, Kerstin, was just like, hey, can we go inside? Do you mind if I go inside? And I was like, sure, I'll hang out here because we had the 2 boys at the time. I was like, I'm not going to let 2 boys go running around in a church because I know they'd break something. And that's the last thing I needed at that moment. And she went in and she was in there for a few moments. I saw through the door. It was beautiful. I mean, it just was like an instant flashback to that Catholic parish in Arizona. Because I remember just that look, that feeling, the pews. It just instantly took me back for a moment before everything. And it was just like, oh, that looks really good. And I remember when she came out, already seemed different from the moment she went in. And she came out and she had information about Project Rachel, which is a ministry. It's a national ministry for women who have, experience of abortion, and it's a great ministry. And she literally got set up with that, and that started her on that path. And instantly, she started down that path. And then she started doing RCIA, and our whole family shift just upside down. And regardless of how, God came into our lives, he was there, and it was very well present. And even though I wasn't Catholic, she wasn't Catholic at the time, we felt that grace. We felt that love. And it was almost kind of like that, you hear that saying, he leaves the 99 to find the one. And it truly felt at that moment that he left everyone else in the world to find us at that exact moment, because we matter so much to him. That no matter how far we strayed, no matter how much we just have done in our lives, I'm going to find you and I'm going to bring you home, and you are going to know my love. And it was such a beautiful moment, because that propelled our lives. I mean, we wouldn't be where we're at now. We wouldn't be who we are now if it wasn't for that just, I say God moment, just to be like, let's take a walk and let's walk into this church. Because if we didn't have that moment, he would have found us one way or another. He would have done it, but he just did it so perfectly at that moment. When Kerstin was going through RCIA, she got involved with Project Rachel. And that was the beauty of that, is while she was going through that, she was able to seek out and find her own healing through Project Rachel, which was fantastic. They have support groups, they have retreats, a lot of ways for women to realize that they're not the only ones who've experienced this, and they can share and learn and grow together. And I mean, from the very first meeting, there was an instant change in her. And she wasn't the only one. She wasn't alone in this. I feel like that's the biggest thing, is when we isolate ourselves, it's harder on ourselves. But when we realize that there are other people who experience this, and sharing that witness of what she's experienced allows for to connect with other women. So that ties back in that, that witness ability, and through that. And it was great through her coming into the church. And then as opportunities arose, the opportunity came for her to be the Project Rachel coordinator. I don't think there was a position that could have ever been made more perfect for her. I mean, she gets to help bring women to God, get them back into the church, help them through these moments, through these groups, through these retreats, and just helping them rekindle that love and that fire for Christ, and just to know that, one, they are loved. I think that's the biggest thing when we make mistakes, just reminding that you are loved. Nothing will take away God's love. And then just to bring them back to his grace and his mercy. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. When Kerstin was going through RCA, my wife, and it got to the point where, you're kind of at that end where you have to kind of meet these milestones to be fully part of the church. And one of them was her having to go to confession. I mean, at that moment, there were less than 4 or 5 people who knew about the abortion. And the last thing she wanted to do, or anybody wanted to do, was, let's just go tell the Catholic Church this, and from what I remember of, her that day, it was, it's been great. I've really enjoyed the classes, but I know this is going to stop me from going further. And, I remember her going that day, and I remember her coming back, and she just broke into tears. And I was like, oh no, what happened? But it was so vastly opposite. It was the best thing that happened. It was the fact that for one of the first times that she truly felt God's forgiveness and truly felt his love and knew that she was right where she needed to be. She wasn't going to be pushed away. She wasn't going to be turned away. She was going to be more embraced than she ever thought she could be at that moment. Because it said God doesn't come for the healthy, he comes for the sick. And at that moment, he was right there for her. And that priest that she was going through RCA with, it was just like, that might have been the first person he ever encountered that had an abortion and had to have a confession with that. But to her, it didn't matter. It was literally Christ at that moment she was talking to. I will honestly say, even going into, fast forward 2 years later, different priest at the time, that when I was going through RCIA, I still remember we had to schedule it. We had to plot it on a schedule, and I wrote it all out. And I mean, that was the hardest thing to do, is write out your sins from the moment you can remember till that moment. And the abortion was one of the biggest ones, almost towards the end of that list. And myself, I was like, going from her, I knew, obviously, I'm not going to get turned away. But I remember this probably was one of the most impactful moments of my life. Probably life-changing, I will honestly say, is I still remember sitting there, going through all of it. I'm bawling. And I was just waiting for that penance, waiting for me to be told that I did something wrong. But when I looked up, the priest was just smiling at me. And I've never felt a smile like that before. And I literally knew at that moment, like I said, that I was the one he left the 99 to find. Like, it's kind of like, when a father, is around his father. Like, I truly felt finally like the man he created me to be. I finally felt like a son of God. And I finally felt home. And it was one of the most incredible moments I've ever had in my life. And I look back at hers, and then I look at that one, and I'm just kind of like, I should have saw it coming. It's like I saw her thing, but then in the end of the day, it was just such a special moment that I had with God at that moment. And I knew that he was there. I knew he was present in my life. And that love was just in abundance. I've never felt more loved than I've ever had at that moment. And I continue to see that love grow every single day. And it was just incredible.